do children suffer karma the way adults do?
See, karma is derived from the word kri, means to act, to, and that includes thought. So every thought, every movement, every physical movement, and for our purposes, mental movement is also physical movement, will have its consequences. Obviously, if a child has a less mature intention than an adult, then the consequences will be different, isn't it? But everybody is born with this inherent tendency driven by desire. So even when, there's a philosophy that stipulates tabula rasa, that we start off with a blank page, and to some extent it's true. We start off with having to relearn how to walk and how to do certain activities, memories are built up and so on. But there's an inherent kind of unconscious baggage that we bring across. So every child will have that. And what will add to it is every action that will be binding, and every action is binding to some extent. The only action which is not binding will be those actions done for the sake of yajna, that is for the sake of worship. So in doing action there's a certain mindfulness that's required in doing all activities, which puts one in the present moment. Any drive toward the future will create anxiety for us. What karma yoga is doing action in a unified way, in a non-disturbing way, so that the mind doesn't get unduly agitated. The whole of spirituality is a psychological process which is to do with how calm or agitated is the mind. It is only the pure or clarified mind that will see God or see the truth. And even we may even say that a desire for God only comes when the mind is also clarified. This comes out in the Gospel of Ramakrishna itself. So purifying and clarifying the mind, making sure that the mind, which is akin to a big lake, now even a work done by a professor or a doctor, Greenfield, who's a neurosurgical expert, even she will compare the mind to a kind of lake with different sized pebbles being put into it. One representing cognitive faculty, the other representing a reaction to the immediate circumstance which is there. So another interesting thing is that memory is not like a book stored in a library. They've discovered that memory is bringing that book out and then modifying it again before it goes back, adding to it. You can actually block a memory. You can block a memory by breaking the proteins necessary to capture that memory. And for example, if you have a fear of spiders, there's a great deal of work done whereby even on day one, a person can reach out and touch a tarantula. How is it done? It's done by bringing a person to the feeling of fear they have, arachnophobia, bringing that fear they have, and then getting a person at least to do something preliminary, and then they take a drug which will block the protein connection. So effectively, the memory doesn't come up as it used to come up. It blocks it. And they can not only go toward that cage where the tarantula is there, but they'll find out even on day one or day two, they can stroke it and make friends with it.
Wow.
Can you do it without the drug is an interesting question. My view would be yes, you can do it, because you can, being separate from the intellect, being separate from the mind per se. You know, the Sankhya has its arrangement, its geography of the mind. So it says that there are the indriyas first, the sense organs. And then the sense organs, which are purely psychological and can be replayed in a dream. So those sense organs, superior to that, naturally would be the sense objects themselves. Well, superior to that would be the intellect, or the mind, sorry. And the mind is a kind of recording office, a reception faculty. You view it like a big business building. A reception faculty, your office is there, and the messages are taken and sorted, and emotionally dealt with there, and passed on to the executive faculty, what they call buddhi, the discriminating faculty, which then goes and sorts it and makes a decision about it, and then presents it to the seeming owner of it, the coordinating ego, and then ultimately he presents it to the ultimate ego, which is the divine self, and then the replays. That's the way the Sankhya's would view it. Sankhya's and the yogis would view it. So that being the case, it would be entirely possible to control everything in the intellect, control everything in the mind, control all the sense organs and so on. In which case just willing it would produce that protein blocker. And that way may well be behind also the power of the placebo. The placebo effect is something that is real and measured.
Sure, yeah.
They've discovered that even if you know it's a placebo, it still works.
It's incredible.
Yeah. So there's a kind of order to things. Just like driving a car or driving a chariot, five horse chariot or 10 horse chariot, depending. Five organs of reaction, if you will, and 5 organs of input. And all of those organs are the external of the skin. Eyes, ears, and all on the external of the skin. Same too with a small cell. In a cell, you find all the receptive faculties are on the membrane of the cell. It's not in the nucleus of the cell. The idea that the DNA is the controlling brain, if you like, of the cell is disbanded completely with discoveries in epigenetics. Epigenetics. Okay. Epigenetics says that there are a kind of structures around the DNA itself, and those structures act as switch on, switch off buttons to the DNA programming. And that in turn is programmed by reactions to the environment. You can test it over a while. So even without the chemical, you'll find behavior can be changed in mice and rats and so on and so forth, these experiments, and in people too. So a woman who is in labor, or even before labor, in pregnancy and so on, it's very important that their mind is calm, that they have a good environment, because that thought and intention passes on to every single cell of the body, including the fetus. Okay. Just as the nourishment that the mother takes in goes everywhere, including that of the fetus.
Yes.
Thought's the same thing. So thought is a very powerful thing. It's controlling the thought, which is the key in all spiritual endeavor. Concentration is the key. So even in an atheistic situation, cultivation of concentration is an important thing on 2 counts. Firstly, for efficiency, but secondly, in order to not disturb the mind further into realms of anxiety, difficulties like that.
Okay. Excellent. Okay.
So we be careful what we put into a unit called a second.
Yeah.
Second being presented as a blank check, God holding his hands up, here my child, here's a second. What will you put in it? Oh, I hate my neighbor's nose, or I worry about this, and so on. Like that we can stand back in reverie and see all the thoughts that we have and categorize them into whether this will be useful to us or whether it will be damaging to us. So we try and put in subject thoughts continuously, not just to deal with the in situ elements of the opposite, of religious and tamas, but also as a buffer, also as a way of reshaping the unconscious behavioral mind, making sure that it is, the habit level is truly pure. So when we say purity of mind, we really mean on the unconscious level.
How do we deal with pain in the sense that we try and have pure thoughts, good thoughts, productive thoughts for productive life and spiritual life. Pain comes in for someone, for anybody that suffers pain, and there's a lot of people that do on a regular basis. It can really drag your thoughts back down. How do we overcome that when you're constantly targeted by pain?
Physical pain?
Physical pain, yes.
Pain.
Physical pain from a physical illness, let's say, for example. What's the best way to deal with that?
Yeah. Well, the best way is if you have a preceding habit that can deal with it. Because all the great saints and sages went through physical pain, there's no doubt. The other day was Swami Purnananda's birth celebration of the disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. So we see how he was in tremendous pain toward the end of his life. A gangrene on the leg, on the foot and so on, all of these things, but maintained a mental equilibrium. In other words, was able to detach from the body. Since the body and mind, in a sense, are separate, in a sense, they're the same as well. They're an integrated unit. One is a subtle version of the other, one is a gross version of the one. But there is the more subtle is the more causal also. So we can control the body with the mind. We can control body with thought. The fact that most people haven't accomplished that is another question.
Okay.
So it's to spend the life in such a way that we realize that I am not the body-mind complex. I am something separate, and therefore, theoretically at least, I can detach myself.
Okay.
We do it anyway. When somebody finds something interesting, or a child bangs his knee, you pick the child up and point to something else, diverting the attention. The child soon forgets about the pain in the knee. So when we divert our attention and get accustomed to doing that, then we can take the mind away from the pain. In the meantime, what we'll do? Well, what cannot be cured has to be endured. The endurance itself can be a spiritual exercise. And Christianity has in some way made a speciality of this. That there is a kind of suffering, and there can be a glorification in some way of the suffering. Not that we invite it, but what we can't change, then we have to endure it. That endurance itself can be a flower offering. If you read the life of Saint Teresa of Lisieux, she offered the very smallest things, small flower offerings. One example. In the communal life of the convent, she found it increasingly disturbing because there was a nun maybe in the front of her who kept fidgeting. Even that she registered and said, Lord, I offer you this frustration to you. This is my little flower.
She offered a frustration to the Lord as a flower.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. You see?
Okay.
So in that way, she was overcome. Then of course it didn't become a distraction anymore, it became a flower offering instead.
Okay. Excellent.
So it's the ability to transform these things, small things, as well as the big things, into something that is positive. You know, Sri Ramakrishna used to say the rent for the body is physical suffering. Well, no one's immune from it. And the advantage of us physically experiencing the suffering is we develop compassion for somebody else who's suffering. Yes. Imagine if you try to, the common example would be bereavement. If people haven't got the psychological pain of bereavement, if they haven't come across that, then they might say something which on the surface may seem comforting. You know, I'm sorry for your loss, all these kinds of things. But the person who's going through it will kind of know this person is well-intentioned, but they don't really know what I'm suffering. And so when you know that suffering, then you can empathize with that. And the basis for true compassion is to feel what does the other person feel. Without judging, without criticizing, what does the other person feel if we feel the same thing. There are some people who voluntarily suffer for others, take the suffering of others onto themselves. But the preemptive recipe is for all of us. That is, you have to keep the body pure. So in Patanjali Yoga Sutras, you find there the 8 steps The 8 steps are essentially yoga, meditation, concentration. Yam, niyam come first, things which universally should be controlled. But niyam is there, first item there is purity. We have to cultivate purity. Now the commentators say purity of what? The purity of the body, as well as purity of the mind. Well, how do you purify the body? We purify the body, obviously through bathing and so on, removing the external germs, bacterial layers and so on, fine. But the internal side also has to be dealt with. That means we have to select pure food, sattvic food. Thinking has its immediate effect on the closest environment we have, the body. So as soon as I think some unkind thought, every single cell of the body, some 50, 70 trillion cells of the body vibrate with it. When I think in truth, goodness, beauty, love, harmony, every single cell of the body vibrates with it. We have to make sure that that investment is made, and we have a time factor to do it. If we escape the first second, third second, we have the 4th, 5th, 6th and 7th seconds to deal with it. Put something better in. Having the advantage of standing back and being able to review what's going on in the mind, we can do it. So keeping the body internally pure through food, thought and exercise also. So I know that people have different ideas about how to yoga exercise, for example, and most people will view yoga as that, as physical exercise. So earlier we had people who were involved in that here, and it's to look after the body internally by moving the lymph around through exercise that we have to do, making the body strong, making sure that we tune up our earth car instrument as finely as we possibly can. Despite that, the body will still fall ill. But at least there'll be a stronger immunization against it, there's stronger resistance against it. So keeping the body well exercised, particularly what we call a cooking section, the abdominal area. Yeah.
Yes.
That has to, it's in the Kathopanishad, 11 gates to the city are mentioned. And 2 of them are not mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita. One is the Brahmarandra, where yogi leaves the body, the royal entrance, you might say. And then the other is the original entrance, where birth was given the navel. There's also an entrance.
The navel?
Yeah.
So
the umbilicus, that's where you started your life.
Okay.
It was only when that was detached that you independently got your nourishment and so on. Independent life was there once the umbilicus is cut. So around that whole area is your whole assimilation, digestion, elimination processes there. Keeping that enormously healthy is very important.
Okay, more important than anywhere else?
Not more, well,
as important.
It certainly would be a most significant part of health.
Okay.
In fact, if you try and trace back even maybe the common cold, which is, let's say, somebody says, oh, that's a virus. Well, how is it some people get a virus and other people don't get the virus? One person's immune system is stronger, can combat it. We're all breathing in the same germs.
Yes.
Why is it one person gets it, the other person doesn't? So it's not a chance thing, it's the fact that one person is more robust, more of a robust resistance. So if we take this seriously, this body as God's divine instrument, for 2 reasons. Firstly, to fulfill the purpose of perfection, the purpose of understanding our own divine origin, a vision of God, if you will. If the body-mind is to do that, then we have to tune both up. And secondly, if it is there for His service, we have to do the same. These are the two aspects of why we have a body in the first place, why we have this body-mind complex, as part of an evolution that is an evolving God coming out, unfolding in us, for the benefit of all, in our individual ways, but principally for it to come out So all education is seen like that. Sister Vedanta, for example, in her schools, would have been keen to echo Swami Vivekananda's sentiments about education, to say knowledge is already in you, but it has to come out. The teacher is just the stimulus for it, the occasion or the stimulus for it. That's all. No one's teaching anybody. You're just bringing it out from inside. We have this enormous potential that we can represent in the DNA. A small fraction of a hair can be found on the cheek, where visible hair is not normally found. We can chop it into, let's say, 1,000 pieces. Take one, put it under an electron microscope, and see there in the nucleus of the cell the DNA structure. This is what the yogis call kundalini, the thing that's coiled up.
DNA?
Our potential is coiled up in there. Probably over 100,000 coded messages being available to us. The normal person only playing a few. Unfold our full potential there is what's necessary. So that covers all the secular aspects of our life: study, unfolding our own individual purpose, something that you can do, nobody else on the planet can do, and generally unfolding toward spiritual fulfillment. And God unfolding within us. That's the idea. That's how we view evolution. How Vivekananda puts it is, you can't get evolution without involution. The thing must be involved. No more than you can get an evolved tree without involving the seed. The potentiality in the seed. Full tree is there in the seed itself. And so it just unfolds. That's very different from any idea of chance. So evolution without a teleological purpose is not how we see it. We see evolution, in fact, we find the origins of evolution there, and the yogis mention it, Patanjali Yoga Sutras mention it. Good and bad deeds are not the direct causes of transformations. They are simply removers of obstacles. And the example given is, like a farmer with water in the fields, wants to get the water to the fields. Well, so many blockages in the way, they can take off each gate, as many as they like, or one at a time, and the water flows in by itself. You don't have to laboriously go and get a teaspoon of water and transfer it to the other side, or even a bucket and transfer it to the other side. That would be laborious work. We allow nature to do it itself, just to flow through. God's grace, God's glory, flowing through by itself, arrives to us as thought. Thought, inspiration, creativity, ultimately action. It's all God's glory. So God's grace coming through, we don't have to specifically sit down, Lord, will your grace come to me? The act of thinking is itself God's grace. We didn't catch that. We ignored that aspect of it. Yeah.
Okay. So, chapter 11, 30 or 36, is that a suitable one? Or?
It's all right.
Okay. So when you're ready, I'll read it, right?
Okay.
It is meet, O Rishikesha, that the world is delighted and rejoices in thy praise, that Rakshasas fly in fear to all quarters, and all the hosts of Siddhas bow down to thee in adoration.
Yeah, okay, so Rishikesha, that means what? Often that's a title given, Rishikesha.
Okay.
Right? So Lord of all the sages. It is right that the world delights and rejoices in glorifying you. The world should do it. Now, what about people who don't seem to be glorifying? But everywhere we look, we find glorification in nature. Here we have a poet's eye, we can see the birds glorifying the Lord in song. We can see the flowers blooming and glorifying in this way. Everything acting as an expression of God's glory. We can easily see how a glorification will come. But why should we glorify an entity? It involves thankfulness also. So again, it comes back to our original formula of oats.
Yes.
They observe something correctly, and then that leads to an appreciation of it and a thankfulness. Yeah.
Okay.
So we don't get the appreciation if we didn't observe it correctly. We just take it for granted. You often hear amongst atheists, what did God do for me? Well, your heart is pumping, speech is available to you, thought is available to you. You've got to digest your food. Later on say, you see, Kalasmi, I come as time, the world destroying time. So all of this, wherever we look, is God. If we tune in correctly, then we can get a feeling of glorifying it. Praising and glorifying and thankfulness, all of that is involved. The demons fly in fear in all directions, that is, all the non-harmonious forces will fly in the face of it by itself, just as when the sun rises, then the night disappears by itself. It doesn't require a particular transport train to take the night away. The night just goes when light comes. So in all directions, and all the hosts of perfected beings bow down to you. That is, those entities that are pure and prone to glorification, they bow down to you. So this is part of a cosmic vision, much of which is symbolic, of course. Sure. And it's as if we saw the universe. Now, right now, we have the available ability to see the universe as we've never seen it before. We've seen beyond our own Milky Way to other galaxies. We've seen billions of other galaxies through the Hubble telescope. And now they're refining much, much more clarity in the telescopes being used. Even there are some telescopes that we use in deserts that will eliminate much of the interference. Our telescope, we have very clear skies and so on. We didn't suspect that any of that was there until comparatively recently, actually. Until, in fact, the Hubble telescope. We didn't really realize. Initially we thought only the solar system is there, then we thought, oh, only this galaxy is here. Any object we saw in the sky, we thought it belongs to the Milky Way. And then we saw, oh, the Milky Way is just one of a group, a kind of gang of galaxies clustered together. And then that's associated with other galaxies, and there are literally billions of such galaxies. So when you look at that, immediately a kind of elevation of the spirit occurs when you say how vast, how infinite things are. So there's a spontaneous reaction that goes toward that. And if you have a pure eye, if you have an eye that understands it better, an eye that is tuned into the glory of God with a sense of thankfulness, adoration, continuously present there, then you'll find part of that would be these hosts of illumined beings. Illumined beings, we might say, Bhutas. Illumined beings, we might give them a personality, of course, but any illuminating factor we can see. There are equally illuminating factors in the human body. The eyes, ears, all these are indriyas, sense organs. They are, to that extent, they are devas, they are revealing factors, illuminating factors. So there are all these illuminating factors there. By their very presence, we find that they are giving an element of glory to the highest. When we put in an intentional thought and sustain it, keep it sustained, then that translates according to the Vedanta system that is based on the Sankhya geography of things, that mobilizes these devas, these subtle forces, these illuminating factors, what we call tanmatras, that arranges itself and presents it as the occasion before our eyes. People, place, and events come before us as a condensation of it. That's the idea about it. So, should we give thanks about it? There's the next question. There's also a passage there that says, not to give thanks is very like stealing. Yes. Yeah. It is a kind of a theft. We can take the remnants of those things offered to them. The kind of thankfulness must be there. It comes back to the idea of yajna. All actions should be of a kind of sacrificial, sacred type. We view things in that way, then the world changes for us apart from everything else.
Okay.
We not only reform the habit level, but we also reform the environment around us. So we can say, and why should they not bow down to you, Almighty Being, who are greater than all primal cause, even of Brahma. Brahma, the creator, is a primal cause because of the creative impulse that creates everything else. It does it through the primary vak, word. Same thing is used in John's Gospel. In the beginning was the word. The mobilizing creative effect going on. What do you call Saraswati? So Saraswati is the Shakti, the energy portion of Brahma, if you will.
Okay.
And that comes out in the Rig Veda as Vak.
Okay.
A word, a mobilizing thought. But this being seems to be even more glorious than that, because we find that Brahma acts as an initiating creative impulse. But it is Vasudeva, it is Vishnu, that is keeping the drama going. So, O Lord of the gods, O abode of the universe, in other words, the place where the universe resides, already we know that from a small portion of himself this universe comes, from a previous passage. But now the abode of the universe, where the universe sits inside him, he sits inside the universe, both are true, just as air sits inside a pot and outside a pot, both are true. The restriction of the pot doesn't do anything. You are the imperishable being and non-being. Everything else around us perishes. And even in the cosmic person we find bits and pieces perishing. Like in your own body, you're the same person, but bits and pieces perish and get renewed. Cells at different rates get broken down and renewed and replaced. Being and non-being, you can't say it is definitely existent, nor is it non-existent. Outside of those definition terms, beyond both actually, is what it is. So tam aksharam sadasat param yat. Then he says, Tvam Adideva Purusha Puranas, you are the primal God, the ancient Purusha. Tvam Asya Vivasya Param Didanam. You are the supreme refuge of this universe. You are the knower and the noble and the highest abode. This universe is pervaded by you, O you of infinite form. It goes on like that. Then, what is the point of all of this? Is that all of these statements are useful for meditation. There are a million subjects here, exaggerating slightly, but in unlimited examples here as subjects for meditation. So part and parcel of it is, whatever moves, you are the wind. It's not you are in the wind, you are the wind, it says. See? You are wind, you are death, you are Kala, you're destroying time and death with it. Fire, Lord of water, and the moon. The moon is associated with water and associated with the mind. Lord of all creatures and the great grandfather. Not literally like that in a genetic way, but in other words, you are the ancient forefather, my ancient forefather. To that extent, I am your child. Then again, with great rapture, poetic rapture, having seen all this, see salutations to you 1,000 times, salutations again, salutations to you. Namo namaste, namaste stu sahasra kanta, punascha bhuyo pi nama, namaste, again namaha, prustat ata, prustataste, namostate ide, namostate sarvata eva sarva, nanta, viryamitya, vikramastam, sarvam, samapnosi tatosi sarvaha. Salutations to you before, salutations to you behind, salutations to you on every side. What does it remind us of? It reminds us of a prayer of Saint Patrick, which I think is on the wall. You can bring it down. Yeah. So, prayer of Saint Patrick. There I rise today through God's strength to pilot me, God's might to uphold me, God's eye to look before me, God's ear to hear me, God's word to speak to me, God's hand to guard me, God's way to lie before me, God's shield to protect me, God's host to secure me from everyone who desires me ill. Then he says, Christ with me, Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ in me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ on my right, Christ on my left, Christ where I lie down, Christ where I sit, Christ where I arise, Christ in the heart of every man who thinks of me, Christ in the mouth of every man who speaks of me, Christ in every eye that sees me, Christ in every ear that hears me. So salutations to you before, salutations to you behind, salutations to you on every side. Oh, all infinite in might and immeasurable in strength. You pervade all, and therefore you are all. So that's all. You are all, not you're in all at this point. Then, of course, it occurs to Arjuna that when before this vision, he spoke maybe a little carelessly. So he says, Saketi matta prasabham yad uktam. He Krishna, he Yadava, he Saketi, Ajanata, Mahimanam Dvetam, Maya Pramadat, Pranayina Vapi. Whatever I have rashly said from carelessness or affection, even just friendliness, slapping you on the back, addressing you as, oh Krishna, oh Yadava, somebody of the Yadava clan, oh friend, or hey you there, looking on you merely as a friend, unaware of this greatness of yours. I didn't see that. I didn't even see you with the Vishnu forearms. Now I am seeing you as this tremendous cosmic being, with galaxies whirling around you, with dark matter, if you will, everywhere, dark energy everywhere, everything that's sparkling, everything. This is the vision that he sees. Yes. So then an apology. In whatever way I may have insulted you in fun, while playing, resting, sitting, eating, while alone, or in company, all that, O Achyuta, I implore you, O immeasurable one, to forgive. So like that. You are the Father of the world, moving and unmoving things. You are the object of its worship, its most venerable teacher, the none equal to you in the three worlds. Who could then be greater than you, O thou of incomparable might? Everything that we understand occurs in the three worlds. What are these three worlds? Privately, they are the three worlds of your consciousness, waking, dream, and dreamless sleep. These three phases are not specifically mentioned here in the Bhagavad Gita, just inferred. But then, of course, there are three worlds. The observable universe is what people refer to. There's the observable universe, we call that Bhu. And then there's the intermediate space, where everything knits together, is woven, warp and woof, and things fall into it. And then there's that which is beyond.
May I ask you, just what is dreamless sleep?
Dreamless sleep. Dreamless sleep is an absence of time, sense of time, absence of sense of space. But I'm answering it thinking you've never experienced it. You've experienced it, isn't it? Where there's a blank, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
You say, I slept well, I slept peacefully. Well, there's no division there, that's why.
Okay.
If there was a division there, then you might have had a restless sleep, like a nightmare.
Okay.
So there's no division like that. There's no time, no space, no causation is there. No sense of ego or I is there. This is the most original, primal point of potential creativity there is. So from that dreamless sleep, you'll find emerging dream.
Okay.
Now, dreamless sleep is one pole, and waking state is another pole, and dream is a mixture of the two.
Okay.
So when we say layered, if you will, on top of dreamless sleep would be the working, waking world encroaching, creating dreams for us.
Okay.
On a cosmic level, we find the same thing. The rule is what we find on the microcosm, we find in the macrocosm. If we use one example here, by inference, we can say it's true of the whole universe, and then test it out. And Einstein was a person who did it. So he took some principles and applied it to the whole universe, and we're now only discovering the validity of it, such as gravitational waves. Yes, predicted by Einstein. He hadn't seen it before, we couldn't verify it. Now he had verified it. Well, all it is taking the local situation and applying it everywhere. So that seems to work. So if we have a body here, could there not be then a cosmic body? A cosmic mind? Could there be a mind without a body? So these are some of the idealistic suggestions made. We know to think and speak and discuss these things, a brain is necessary. But could it be that it is only a limited avenue that we could actually dispense with the brain and equally communicate with each other? Vivekananda hints at this in some way. So in his Raja Yoga, he makes that remark, that electrical energy can travel along a wire, but it also can travel without a wire, and he was making the comment before wireless technology was involved. So could there be communication without the wire? Well, we do it, isn't it? So we have wireless communication. The principle of the cell phone is that it operates because there's a local radio signal that we call a cell, and then that ties us over to the next cell, and to the next cell. But it's all wireless. They're just using the benefit of the electromagnetic wave system, which is currently everywhere, and radio waves can travel through it. Okay. So in the same way, could there be a disembodied mind? Could there be something called God's mind? Our philosophy says it's so. So what is the universe but nothing more than the cosmic Purusha? There's a famous Purusha Suktam like that, again, coming to the Rig Veda, which is something that matches this great cosmic person. This universe, therefore, God's body. This is what this vision is saying. You're observing God's body, and no doubt the influence of God's mind behind it. Therefore, bowing down and prostrating my body before you, I entreat you, O adorable Lord, to be gracious. Tasmat pranamya pranidhaya kayam prasadhaya tvam aham isham idyam. Pita piteva putrasya sakeva sakuha. Priya priyaya rasi deva sudam. Therefore, bowing down and prostrating my body before you, I entreat you, O adorable Lord, to be gracious. As a father forgives his son, a friend his friend, and a lover his beloved, even so should you forgive me, O Lord. Feeling so overwhelmed. Now we can use the same thing. We see a person, and then the remedy or the requirement for spiritual insight is to see God in that person. Seeing God in that person leads you to an understanding, oh, I'm sorry, I just treated you as a mere person instead of the Lord of the universe. Seeing that, for example, in a household life, where in the Hindu view anyway, the model for marital life would be Rama and Sita, the story in the Ramayana. Then because Rama sees Sita as mother goddess of the entire universe, and Sita sees Rama as the Lord of the universe. On that basis they work. Now if you apply that same model as where it's recommended to domestic life or a normal householder, very often that's forgotten. Mother, you are the mother of the entire universe. How is it I never saw it? Same principle is there when we come to the life of Holy Mother Sharada Devi. Who would have suspected a woman going back going about her normal rural duties, looking after family, washing the dishes, cooking the food, all of these things being done. And people still going along to her for that phase of her life, 4-month Diksha, getting her blessing. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. Some of them even doubting. This seems like an ordinary woman to me. In fact, some people thinking, oh, a more august, dignified woman must have been the consort of Ramakrishna. No, it's this simple woman here. Not understanding the hidden nature of her divinity, you see, taking it for granted. We have the supreme example of Mahamaya hiding herself, hiding her full glory with so-called ordinary activities. And yet, close examination of her life showed that the level of purity was such that she could be none other than the mother of the universe. And the experience of others and so on. Great giants like Vivekananda having taken 2 baths in the Ganga before meeting with her, then doing full prostration in front of her, seeing the full glory, registering to others, you have not understood the full glory of the mother. There's a living mother of the universe before us, like that. So I'm reminded of that here as well. So we now come onto a different section. This is 45 to 46. Because, you see, all of this is seen with an element of destruction going on.
Okay.
And so there's a certain begging, please, can you now bring me an ordinary benign vision? Even that is an extraordinary vision, that is Vishnu with the 4 hands and so on. Just give me that one, because right now what am I seeing? I'm seeing people sticking out of your curved teeth. I'm seeing the enemy being devoured. I'm seeing all these great grandsires. I'm seeing Bhishma, this noble entity. Clearly it's symbolic because Bhishma at that time is lying on the field, actually, on a bed of arrows. But seeing all these entities being devoured, it's like looking into the universe as we understand it now from an astronomical point of view. And cosmologists and astrophysicists will say, we think it's a lovely, gentle universe. It's violent out there. There are black holes consuming things. You know, there are things being devoured by black holes, even as we speak. There are galaxies crashing into other galaxies. There are galaxies erupting as supernova, or not galaxies, but stars erupting as supernova in the last throes of their death, and all the rest of it. And when you speculate now, how will the world look for us at its current rate, without any renewed hydrogen going in, we see as a cold, lonely universe being frozen out. Not very pleasant. So, but life is in that way. We don't have this difficulty of asking, how is it, and comes back to your original question, how is it that we find so much suffering in this world, even amongst animals? Can we put it at the doorstep of a loving God? How can the God be loving when we see all that? But we don't look at it in that way. See? We are bold enough to see that there is a destructive side of this. There's a benign side, no doubt, but a destructive side also. For the devotee, it's all benign. But huge destruction. Death means nothing. We think death is a tragedy. But in this cosmic context, birth, life and death is just the order of things. We have to accept it.
Yes.
We can leave it off there. We can pick that up.
Okay.